right, so we're going to get settled in a little bit of a different wave of awareness. It's going to be seated. So I want you to sit on top of your bolster, and you might let the legs have a moment of just their uprightness out of the hip. But in some sense, when we let the legs motion open and we give them plenty of support, which is the blocks, you want to have the blocks lift up the legs. I haven't tried the blocks at this height before, honestly. So if you want to have your blocks up higher, you could do that. You could have them up. You know, maybe that's easier for your hips. So get yourself settled so you're in a cobbler's pose. And you'll put the sand across your feet. So the feet are together, kind of a little bit open. The sand just kind of fills up that space. You could have the sand lengthwise, you could have it horizontal. And when you motion your upper balance, I want you to get a feeling where your spine has an ability to rise up out of the natural curves of the spine, right? So there's 3 curves. So we'll take a belt and unbuckle, so you got a lot of length with your belt. And when you move your hips down to the legs center and descend, the knees have that openness for the hips to have their own processing. And when you hold onto the belt, you're going to reach that overhead and lifting up the borders of the chest. Okay, so kind of feel, this will be kind of a little bit of an extended seated pattern. We'll do several poses on each side, but we'll start with symmetry. So feel when the arms have to, you know, kind of exercise themselves to lift. It's a little bit of heat. And then feel if you bring your hands out quite far open on your belt and then move the arms back or move them in front of your head and feel which direction allows you to sit up tall. Just give a moment of noticing that awareness through the shoulders and the musculature of your rib cage and the chest. Okay. Now release that clasp on the belt, just set that aside. And we'll take both of the arms to reach to the hands, interlacing in front of your chest, and push the hands inside out forward of the chest and round your back. So feel that scooping of the core muscles. And center where the breath is felt. Maybe you're not so certain about how your neck should place here. So when we come up towards the arms lifting to the ceiling, let's bring the arms open, out, relax, and then we'll change the legs. We'll start to work into this leg set. So I want you to slide your blocks out and then moving that sand off to the side yard and extend your left leg. So you have that reach through the left leg, the musculature just stretches out from your buttock. And then as you cross the right leg over, you'll take a rotation. So gather your hand and your wrist, your forearm to that right leg and press out through that left heel, forward and reaching downwards to the ground space. And then as you turn to the right, you have blankets probably behind you, and you might sort out how you rotate, but feel where the movement is centered in your ribs. Maybe the abdomen really needs to be soft in this position for you to feel grounded in the hips. And these seated poses can be quite interesting for our self-esteem, I think. It's challenging to be upright and feel comfortable in the abdominal kind of whirlwind in the back complex. So we're using quite a vigorous pattern here to strengthen this mid-body. So come back forward. Now cross the bottom leg. So you're going to bend through that left leg. So you hook that foot now, bending the leg so the left foot is towards the bolster. The right leg stays on top. And now as you feel the hands just reaching below that front knee, feel the center of the abdomen relax downwards. And then see if you can lift and move through that thoracic, the mid spine, to turn back to the right one last time. Hand reaches back to the blanket, and then reach the left arm to the very top seam of that right leg. So it's an interesting quadricep press off. So you're trying to press a little bit into your right quad, and then come into the rotation to the right. You know, feeling if the waist and the spine, the discs, it's like they do become kind of discal, even though that might not be a word, discal, but there's like this circulation that occurs when you take the twist with the legs both bent. Okay, so we'll visit this for a few moments. Feel the vigorous motion of that left arm. Breathe, inhaling to lift. Good, and exhaling to feel the twist with even the shoulder rotating back. Okay, come back, center, stretch the right leg out, left knee bending, of course, it stays bending, but we'll put a ball or a block under the left knee, and then add a sandbag to that left upper thigh. And then take off into that side reach, this type of motion. So the opportunity could be a block besides your right leg. So you reach your elbow down, lengthen the left arm. It could be taking a belt under your right foot, holding the belt, right hand, grasping and pulling yourself. So that's a little different attention through the waist, right? One would be elbow down, and then you use gravity to kind of assist your motion. And then holding the belt is a little different of a gravitational assignment, right? As far as your gripping, I'm using both the block and the belt actually. So this is kind of a nice pairing of support. So feel where that left arm reaches, feel where the ribs rotate to the left and ceiling. I'm assuming you have a ceiling where you're at. Good, that's nice. So get a feeling for a few more moments. Left side lengthens. Turn your head down towards the right leg. Breathe. Yeah, even if that left hand gets a little bit curvy, it doesn't have to be very crisp. Of course, that would be the ideal emphasis, but I want you to work on that waist stretching. And then let the left arm reach back behind the left waist, and then feel the weight of the body leaning to the right. Take a moment here. This left side has an essential spaciousness to it, just the waist, the ribs, the armpit, chest. Okay, and then release any grip you have. And then as you come up, we're going to work with this left side now. So we'll have one more side of the seated work. You're going to take the belt off if you use that. Let that right leg go straight in front. Left leg crosses over, sand on the side yard. And then as that left knee points up, just get a feel of your turn. Okay, right arm can either hook to the left leg. I'm going to hold on to my left knee because that seems to be a little bit more comfortable for my shoulder. Okay, so you can have a block or your blankets behind you. You probably need something under your left hand. But, you know, spend the moments here when we're doing these two twisting patterns, noticing what part of your abdomen has this circulation experience where it feels like it's rotating. I kept thinking about disc awareness, but when you rotate to that left, you might feel limited. And then bend that right knee, kind of keep going with it. Bend the right knee so you hook that under and then bring that right arm to that outer left leg and then feel how the twist kind of ventures deeper. The left buttock might kind of lift a tiny bit, so I want you to try to stay centered on your sitting bones, right? And if that right arm is feeling a little tender to this pressure with the elbow, then you certainly could hug the leg, right? So you can try to get a hold of that knee, get a hunk of your knee with your inner elbow, and that can serve as a broadening space for your upper back. Yeah, I kind of like that. If you're not really sensing what that would be, I'll turn the other direction. Maybe it would be a little obvious, but when you do get that kind of hunk of your knee with your elbow, it broadens across the back versus the banding hook and then jabbing, right? That might be a little different with the broadness in your back. So trying to open up into the back space. Just give it a try. You can always pose pass on any of these ideas, but really working through the midsection, breathing. Now, tuning in and sensing how the neck responds here. We'll relax that pressure, come back forward. Take that left leg, stretch it open. See how many of the body parts, the extensions, the extenders, can move on their own without a lot of hand hold. And then I'm just going to put the block to the outside of that left leg, get my sand on my right leg, and then a belt. You don't have to add the belt to the bottom of the left foot, but you could. And then join in with that left hand holding on, or just that left elbow on the block next to your left leg. And you'll work on the leaning down with that arm and that rotation through the right side of the waist. And you can sense that these dynamics are really setting up some inner, some interaction in the organs. So changing gravity's pull, reach the right arm either over the side of your face or behind your back. And maybe you turn your upper spine, so your head turns towards that left side. Doesn't mean that it pushes down to your leg, but really feeling these surface motions, right? Like when I turn my head, my ribs actually kind of suction in. If I keep my arm reaching over, it does have a gain of circulation. It feels kind of an emphasis and enjoyable. But if it's not tolerable for the shoulder, you bring the right arm behind your back. Yeah, you might find these ranges in the ribs it's like they're their own little pieces of extension, right, of your vertebrae, the ribs, all the muscles between, they all are pieces. They may be smaller than an arm, but they're important for everything to operate. So we'll get into the breathing muscles here in a moment, but right now, a few more moments here with this leaning event, the leaning event. Now, if your right arm is overhead, bring it behind you. Slide. If you have that belt, pull yourself back up in center. Okay. And then as you take that sandbag away and the belt goes back by your blankets, we're going to pivot, you're not pivoting your bolster, I am. You're going to sit down in front of your bolster and place a block nearby and your sand, and we'll come back into a horizontal chest opener, but we'll add a bridge to it. So you're going to lift up the hips, place the block underneath the buttocks so you have a little bit of support. And then as you lower your head back to your blankets, after all that kind of rotation dynamics, this might be welcome in this moment for you to experience this midsection reaching. Now we are going to put sand here. You can have sand here. You can have sand at the front of the thighs. You might work on reaching your legs down. And you can place the sand in an intuitive relationship to your body, not necessarily your breath. Maybe the sand on the front of the thighs isn't a breath balancer, but it feels like that's an area that could use some untangling. Your work with the ribs on the bolster will be plenty if you choose not to have a sandbag here. Okay, now the reason it'll be plenty is that you'll reach back and get your belt, And feel how that hold, like maybe randomly holding the belt is nice, and you're not spending a lot of energy on managing that it's a certain width. But I happen to be with my feet to a wall, so I didn't expect that, but it is actually quite welcome for my balance, for my back muscles and my legs, so they don't turn out. So you might try that, even if you need to scurry to a wall space and reorient your practice. But as the hands are holding on, and both ways are fine, as your hands are holding on to the belt, start small, so not as wide angled as you can with your arms. Start when you feel the elbows in their bending experience. And it's like when we started with our feet together, the knees out with the hinge at the legs, the knees bending. Now we have the elbows bending open. But there's a whole breath environment involved with the experience. It's the inner thighs don't really have that lung force. Okay. So feel when you hold the belt, whether it's sizable width or it's small, you can change it anytime. You can go out a little bit with your hands or bring it in closer. Yes, center your experience on the width of your breathing. Even if it doesn't feel like it's a muscle that you're attempting to monitor, a breathing muscle, but that expansiveness. And then we go right into the diaphragm motion. So as you inhale, the diaphragm flows and moves downwards towards the abdomen, right, the actual contents. And as you exhale, the diaphragm flows back up towards the heart, below the heart. So just moving the belly with the breath. Let that be simple. And this shape, right, helps us release that gravitational pull on the organs. So you know how we go upside down, and that the help with that is that we're resting the organs from gravity's downward pull. But this still can release that pull that we have like when we're sitting. And then it moves the organs. So let's take a few more moments here. If you get kind of tense with the position of the belt, let it go. Just let go. Open out the arms, feel the elbows in their bending, relaxed phase. Okay, and then those of us that have a reaction of our feet against something, and if you don't have something your feet are against, you want to get a feeling of reaching through the back of the legs. However, hyperextension can come up. And that's usually right behind the knee, right? That's the place of flapping that moves down. So I want you to feel the sense of circulation in the top of the thigh, like you're pulling up your quadriceps. You're grasping onto them with your muscular capacity, which is something that you have to practice, right? To maintain movement of the abdomen, massaging the organs, pulling up the quadriceps, so you're reaching through the back, above the back of the knee to stretch the leg, right? And that I think takes, using the wall is immensely helpful for that orientation, but get a feel of what parts of the leg are reaching. Is it just the knee, or is it the back of the leg? Okay. So we change, we go to our pose of the cobbler. We move our sand. If you want to keep sand on the upper body, you can, the upper abdomen. You can keep that. And then we'll move into the feet together, the knees apart. And take the moment of noticing your knees pointing up, and then the feet moving together, the knees stretching out, just like we did in the very beginning. And then this has a different surface pull on the inner leg. So with a few moments here, arms are passive, right? They're not holding onto a belt, they're relaxable. And the hip structure does enjoy having that block under it. It gives it a little bit of buffer, but you still could be tender. You know, tensions are a little bit tender on the inner, right in the groins, pelvic floor. Give a few moments, and this is important because we're working on that flow of lymph, and we're setting up for legs up, Viparita Karani in just a moment. So I want you to be kind of ready for that physical drain, right? The fluid drains down to the abdominal area, right? And drains out the thoracic duct. So get a feel of the knees open. And then as you move the knees to point up, the feet kind of pitter-patter a little bit outwards. The knees may be closer together. And then move your sand and take your time to kind of explore what does it feel like when your feet are pushing down and the back muscles all the way to the seat. And then shift your block away. I know that it might be okay just to leave it there and push the bolster down. You could probably get away with that, but what we're going to do is move our one blanket on the top back. So you'll have a blanket behind. Don't lose your belt. You might get hidden. And then as you're still kind of holding up your hips to maintain this is one long belt. Push the feet down first. The spine has to stretch into the brain right now. That sounds kind of strange. Okay, walk the feet in so you're on the roots of the toes. The heels are a little up, and then push the bolster down. You don't have to push it very far, but it's under your pelvis. So now it's that bridge pose, but oh, it's so easy. You got a bolster underneath you. And you might need to rearrange your blankets behind you so you have that satisfaction. I think I'm finding that if my blanket is pretty close, not under my shoulders, but right at the top, I'm finding that's kind of interesting for my neck connection. Neck connection. You can write that out with NECKONNECT. Make a little funny word out of it. So bring the knees to point up. They already are, huh? But lift the feet. And once that proper arches in your back, right? This is quite the lumbar kind of loop of movement. We're going to work on getting our sand on our feet. So I want you to feel how your ribs kind of bulge up and open and how the knees move in. Now, it's almost as if you kind of fight to get the sand on sometimes. So if this feels like the ribs really bulge up a lot, you might lower down a little bit on the bolster. You don't want to have your seat on the other side, but you might get more of your back on that bolster. And then you'll find getting your knees in. Now, this is not everyone's experience, of course. There's many different experiences. But when you bring your knees in, reach the sand to the bottoms of the feet. You are kind of on your own on this, getting your props on. So when you push, play a bit with pushing a little forward. It might be a little scattered for your balance. And then when the legs lift up and you have that range of reaching through the back muscles. Okay, feet flex, of course, they don't have a choice. And you might feel it in your lungs, just the beginning of that circulation dynamic to the heart. Right, so reverse the effects of gravity. And what is interesting about inversions is that this kind of inversion, because it is a bit of a lift up, the legs are as high as we're going to get them in this session, unless you do a shoulder stand. You know, it does increase, right? Blood pressure actually does go up in the pose, and then it has this fast dive. So this is why we're working with the circulation dynamic with the legs up. So there's a physiological focus that you don't want to just rush in and out of the pose. You want to spend the time to orient your throat, the baroreceptors in the throat that actually are going to change that pressure. So make sure your neck is comfortable, the throat is relaxed. And then once your feet are in that shape of supported sand holders, you might bring your arms out to cactus. I don't know, you're in toasted down. So feet are flexing, spine is centered. So nice to have a spine lengthening out of this shape. So there's like two places to bring that meditation inwards. Might be from your bolster, lowering down all the way through the spine to the brainstem. And then feel the opposite side, the abdomen, crafting movement. And it's not fast when you're upside down, right? It's not a fast breath. But it could be a no breath moment where you just don't even bring attention to breathing to get to the next position. But I would encourage you to experience the phases and controls of the breath in each of these shapes. Yeah, I'm finding that my ankles do keep the flex, but there's a little resistance when I lower my expectation of them. I just focus somewhere else, and then they almost kind of push up a little bit my foot into the sand. So you might try a little micro bend of the knees, you know, and take a little bit of that risk. So the legs are vertical. You're avoiding trying to move them over your head. It could be dangerous, but you know, get a feel where your hamstrings are working. Right? They're also stretching. So there's like these duo tactics with the legs up. I think all these legs up is making the screen think that hands are being raised. Okay, so arms are in that pattern of surrender. So letting your eyes close and experiencing cycles of in and out breath. Okay, so let's bend through the knees and let's transition so the back can really fluff and kind of warm up. So this, it's not like this is not a warm shape. There's a lot of heat into the back to claim this. But when you do remove that sand, it's like the spine has been kind of fixed in one frame. So if you have a ball, place it between the knees or use a block and feel the arms open and the knees go side to side. And you certainly could work on letting the feet kick out a little bit, have some sampling of movement. It seems as if the knees with a consistent bend right now, you know, without too much flinching with the feet out of the bent legs, it does stay supportive of your back, sort of like when you sit in a chair, right? Even though that's not the most helpful shape for the upper back, it does kind of stretch out that lower frame a little bit. A little more when we're on our back knees in for our back muscles. So give yourself a good minute, full minute with this crossing side to side. And if the legs feel like they kind of hug into the ball, feel when you go to one side if your knees can kind of, the top leg can push into the ball. And that side of the hip will benefit, right? It'll bring a little bit of density and pressure to the hip that you're on, the hip that's on the bolster. Actually, both sides have an interesting range. Okay, now that the legs have been convinced to move a little side to side, we're going to work on the front of the leg. So when you come back in center, get your belt and take the ball away. I can't think that it would be that helpful under a leg, the ball. So let the left leg lower down and add some sand to the top of that left thigh in the immediate moment, right? Don't give it too much time to stay there by itself. Needs a little sand, a little help from your sand. And the sand could go across. I know that that's a little more of a direction with the foot, but I don't know if it really truly makes that foot turn out. I think that's an issue with, and again, if you're near a wall and you do get to it, you can put your foot at that wall and try to keep it, pointed up. If it's without a wall, it might turn out a bit. So feel the front of that thigh. If that tends to get the left side of the abdomen to lengthen, let that be. Left side of the abdomen goes one direction, right side of the abdomen goes up. So you're going to get the belt under your right foot. That takes a little bit to monitor, doesn't it? And held on to, both sides of the belt to start, and feel the awareness of your feet pushing both sides. So one goes upside down, I guess you could call this upside down, and one pushes forward, and feel that awareness in the hamstrings, well, the right hamstring. Okay. So just like when we do standing poses, which we're going to do just a couple today, but I want you to kind of warm up for them, that the undercurrent, right, the back of this right leg is really warming up. Okay, so without too much kind of pulsing pattern, see if you can get your hands maybe so the arms reach up and they're fairly straight to hold the belt. It's not a contest on how close you get to your foot, because you can usually pull it back, right, with your, and yank on it. So I want you to try to keep that leg so it's straight up. I'm not doing a good job of that. I'm pulling it back. So go back to that prim and proper, straight up with your foot, calf workout. Okay, if your foot is turning in a little bit, use the belt right on the ball of the foot to pull on that right backside, underside of the foot to manage the calf. Yeah, maybe you can feel the back of the lower leg. Maybe you just feel hamstring. Okay. So let's keep the leg pattern here, and we're going to move the right leg out. So you'll hold the belt with the right hand. You move the leg out. The sand's still on the left thigh. Try not to get too lopsided with it. Feel that right leg open. And then pull on the belt so that your energy in the back of that right leg is not just inner thigh, but the back muscles carving into the leg strength. You should feel a little bit of a tone position for your leg muscles. Okay, now come back on up, and then let's move the sand off that left side and hold onto the belt with the left hand. We'll go the leg to the third power, I like to call this one. So we go all the directions, right? To the left side, the right leg goes. Hold onto it with the left hand, cross over through the middle, and let that right leg go a little downstream, like you're pushing down. Another kitty corner awareness. And then work on how does that leg move with your right hand touching your outer right hip. And it can be a guide of motion. Of course, it might not move, it might be stuck. But if this kind of shield on the hip, you can massage that a little bit. Maybe you're not privy to doing that, but even just the hand on the actual outer upper right leg, downwards motion is great. You don't have to have a massage certificate to do this. Okay, head turns to the right. That's another part of it. And then right arm opens out. Left foot is pretty passive now. It's lost its ability to point up. You're on the side. Good. Now bend through the right knee. Very brief. Bring the left foot up into the belt, and before you switch over to the other side, step your feet out into the belt. Like you have a wide stance. Kind of reflect on pulling with the hands. Just feel that. Okay, reversing that flow through the legs. Slide the feet in. Right leg down. Sandbag on that thigh. Okay, and that left foot is holding the belt all by itself. And it's not too much weight, I suppose. But when you gather your hands on the belt, it does help to monitor the circulation through the hip. Right, so you can get into these hyperextensive modes. I know that can start to happen to some of us. So again, if you feel that, feel the very upper back side of that left leg. You want that to be the muscle that is lengthening versus jamming the knee through. So it might be required that you have a micro bend, or you really feel your foot flexing on the top, that left foot. Now let this be certainly an exercise in reaching down through the right foot. So much body awareness is accumulated in this session. Right, so as you're gathering your PhD in body awareness for yourself today, feel how that leg is kind of steeped in circulation. And give a few moments when you're prepping to bring the left leg out. So notice, you know the leg will go open. So how would you prep for that? Would it be reaching through the right foot and then take the belt together, hold it with the left hand? Now this reach with the arm is, we're not trying to move the shoulder out from the back. So that might be a little challenging. You might need to do a little bend of the left arm. And then as you move the leg open, you're trying to keep the right leg about the same. So if your sand is kind of falling off, you might need to slide it up to the front of the hip bone. That left leg goes out. And it motions. Right arm is out to the side. Yeah, I can feel a little bit discombobulated here with your balance, even though you're clearly on the floor already. You can lose your balance even if you're already on your back. Your inner balance. Okay, if the leg is shaky, this side for me, I'm feeling a shakiness at the very top of the leg, inserted into the hip, into the pelvis. You can feel that shakiness. So working with that resistance, right? That's for the bone density. So it's keep that resistance occurring. I mean, if it's so shaky, you don't find that is at all appealing to you, then you get out of the pose or you soften it. You bring the leg a little higher towards the center. That's fine. Now we'll all come back to center and let that right hand hold onto the belt. Cross over, your sand is going to just fall away. Now the left arm could open. The left hand could stay on the left hip, as if you're kind of soothing to move the left leg downwards, over to the right side and down. And then if that experience of the hip is warming it up. Okay, the right foot might be tough for you to just let it go and release the awareness pushing through it. But that would be useful for your right side of your spine. Right, because you're feeling this on the left side, right? Left hip. Okay, right arm can open if your hand is still on your hip. Okay, and maybe turn your head to the left. Good, good. Yeah, that directional assignment is, it's ambiguous really. So if my leg, if I want to kind of move it a little downwards, and then just sense the awareness into my hip. If the upper inner thigh, if that gets really tight, you feel it massively grip. It's an interesting pelvic floor piece. Then I would bend the left knee a little bit more and just kind of pull on the foot so that if you straighten the leg, it can, not that it's going to rupture anything, but it can really nag that inner leg pectineus area. It can be a bit much. So work with what you feel in your left hip. Try to surf around with that. Okay, a few more moments. Yeah, be wherever you want your brain to be. Brain be free, rolled or centered, or just a resting brain. You put a little plaque above your bed, resting brain. Okay, bending through the left knee. Okay, now this time we won't use the belt. Okay, we'll take it away. We'll move it to the side, drop it, and then bring both knees up and get that ball again. It is ideal probably if you had a ball. It doesn't have to be big. It's not going to be a tennis ball. It's going to be squishy. And I haven't really searched in the house for something besides this one, so there's options, but you might be able to search around. But as you move your knees side to side, you want to get a feeling that we did this before, right? We did this right before we did the leg patterns. But this time, when we start to come back off the bolster, actually, no, we're going to stay on the, sorry, I'm changing my path. I got to keep on the program here. So feel the knees go side to side. And then you're going to stop in the center, squeeze into the ball so that the abdominals feel some tone. So even though the knees go, the legs go in, okay, the knees clearly, they're all joined in. But when the knees, or the thighs move inwards, have the ball so it's not right just at the knee bones, right? It's just a little bit in towards the thigh. So if you're to squeeze in, you'll feel the thighs react. They should feel a little bit of toning quality, okay? Now remove the ball, and then you're gonna keep the hips on that bolster. You're gonna go downwards towards the feet, not back towards the blankets. So you're gonna roll to your left, okay? All right, at least I didn't get us going in the wrong direction there. Okay, so turn the bolster, actually keep it just as it is, but get your blankets, stack them up, get your ball, because you might like it for side sage on the inside of the right leg. And then if the blankets are not high enough for you, you can add the top blanket to make it folded up again. I don't know what exact blankets you use, or if you use towels or soft blankets, but you can use pretty much most blankets that are around for this practice at home. But as you stack them up, you want to make sure the height of the blanket, right, is somewhat close to your bolster. That's probably your measurement. And so when I lower my head down and I have my sand option on the right side, I'm going to come into side sage here. So I want you to feel where that inner thigh musculature we just kind of worked with, all the movements of the legs, can now basically steep from that experience, relax into it. And then we'll start working with the mid body and the upper body. So I have a block overhead. I don't feel like touching down to it right now, but I want you to see this as an option. If you like that, you can put the block up to the high setting. But if you do that and you feel some of this shoulder pressure, and you don't like how that, it's more shoulder pressure than waist stretch, then you would refer to opening the arm instead. Okay, so you can play with that. The arm could relax, your arm could open. Your head might turn a little bit towards the ceiling. You might keep your head turned down to the left. And now as you find the side sage that feels helpful for you, you might even wander back to the block again. Then lengthen that inhale and feel how the ribs expand with that resistance even of the sand. Kind of like your gills, right? Expansion. But it just centers and passes back to stillness. So you're kind of moving into stillness with the practice. Great. Yeah, the arm moves, changes its assignment moment to moment. You can likely keep the breath pace slow. You know, the feeling of the waist might be the left side feels neutral. I wouldn't say short, but it's certainly not extending it more. And the right side likely feels a little bit of extension or elongation out of the side. So with that in, I guess that's in your mind, right? That's the experience. It's kind of stuck in your mind if the words say so. But we'll see if that experience holds true. So what we're going to do in between these sides is a little bit of full circulation, right? From arms to legs in dog pose. And I'll give you many variations to lead in and out of that in this cycle of movements on all fours, okay? So you let the arm come down and then you let the sand slide off. And as you know, rolling might be an exaggeration of what you actually do here. So you're basically kind of tucking yourself down towards the left. And then when you move to come up, well, actually to come around to table pose, you move the ball. You can always keep the ball between the thighs on this one too, if you want to play with circulation in the core. And then what I want you to do is take the bolster now on top of, if you're going to use one blanket under your knees, perfect. If you're going to put the bolster on either one or two blankets, and then leave it there and let the hands find, so you have a little bit more surface space here, toes under, lift up the knees, and simply feel how the arms press and the head lowers down. Okay, come back down to the knees. Feel the arch of the spine, lift your head so it's forward, looking forward. And then as you bring your head down, push and lift up the knees and stretch the flaps of the arms right through the ribs and the back. Okay, now one more time. Lower down the knees. Bring your hands up on the bolster. Now remember, I know some of you are going to have a blanket under your knees, so that's fine. But stretch out the back here. So let your head go between your arms, good. And get that feeling of the shoulders. Now this is the ultimate shoulder backing. It's kind of what we lack, right, when we're lifting our arms overhead. It's this completeness in the back ribs. Breathing. Okay, now feel this back awareness. Okay, one hand at a time comes down, slow, and then that's what you're going to work towards when you get your knees up. Toes under, knees up, stretch back to dog. Really trying to get my back muscles to reach. Okay, just take a few breaths here. You know, maintain that range through the arms. One armpit might be a little open, more open than the other, because we've only done sage on one side. Lower down the knees. Get your bolster close to your middle, right under your middle, and then turn to your right hip and come into side sage on the other hip. So the ball inside the left leg or inside the knee, or no ball, you choose. And then I know the bolsters kind of move a little bit when you hug them with your ribs, so they might not be perfectly across the mat. But when you do aim for this length on the side, yeah, get the feel of that. Man, I sure want that blanket higher. Okay, so as you reach with that upper arm either over, or maybe you work on this rib cage rotation, right? Kind of play with opening and centering. And you might not feel like you're playing at the park, but you know, let your body have some free range here. Don't get it so tightened up in a cage, because that's something we might be dealing with sometimes with our body limitations. Because you put that label on you that you're cage free. Okay, so feel, and if it's limiting, like you go, I'd like to get a little more open, but it's stuck, then let your left arm relax and focus on the movement of your breath. It's limited in body, isn't it? You're kind of limited in this body in some ways, but you know, the realm is different with nostril breathing and out through the mouth. And sometimes I'll even work with my equipment with feeling my mouth relax when I breathe in, and I might feel a little bit more in my ribs. So let your body relax into what seems natural for you to get an improvement in your breathing, which is to breathe better, efficient, getting a little bit more in and even more out, right? The exhale should be longer. From exhalation comes relaxation, right? That's something I think about, and I hope that makes a little sense, but longer exhales, calm. Okay, give yourself some moments if you want to wander with your left arm at all, where you're comfortable, just simply there. Okay, now when we come out, we're going to go back to that cat-cow variation, but we're going to face kind of the other direction. So we'll do a little more of a full work up into the lunges. So what you'll do is move your sand, and you know, I'm trying to bring it to a point where we feel pretty comfortable with the sequencing pattern. So when you come around, okay, I'm just coming up this way so I can be observant, but you'll have your bolster over to the side. You'll pull in a blanket. You'll get rid of one, okay? And then when you move on to the hands and knees, I want to kind of dribble that ball, I guess, but I'll move it away. Get a block set in the front, so it's on the, just on the very, it could be a little bit on your mat, but I'm just going to put mine to the side. Not exactly sure if I need that bolster right in a certain direction, but we'll find out. So when you come into this position, we've done a little bit of movement with hands and knees already, but I want you to go right into a lunge, okay? So take a block set, I guess now it's inside, huh? Reach the right foot through and use the blanket minimally. So I want you to feel like, I know the blanket's nice, and if you're a little tired, you just rest your knee on the blanket for certain. But when you're pulled this way, I mean, we were in side sage and this knee was up. This was the first side sage. And this back leg, well, actually, no, the last side sage, this knee was up, isn't it? And this back leg was lengthening. So we're going from one side to the next. I don't feel like this is side sage pose in my mechanics, but it is similar. Okay. Your brain just thinks it's different. But when you lift up the back knee, it's the same operating patterns with the muscles. So I want you to stay steady with that strong lunge. Now, a lunge is about the right knee above the ankle, and you're trying to knit the muscles on that right side into the right side of the spine. So I want you to try to really stay with that power. So get the blocks higher. If they're a little bit, you know, tilty, be sure your hands can push down to the earth, right? So that they're not kind of tipping to the side. And maintain that reach of that left heel. So it's off the ground. For me, You might have your left heel on the floor for some reason, but I imagine it's a little up or a lot up. Okay. Now, bend the left knee a little bit, so there's a lot more power, like you're going to launch forward for direction. Okay, now straighten out the right leg, so you kind of tilt back. So the left heel might lower down a little bit. And I want you to take the left foot a little bit open to that left side so the feet are not on the same track. You're going to pivot the left foot out a little bit so that left heel may come to the floor. Good, good. Okay, so feel the press. Let's say this is too much with the blocks, or it's just you need more support. You can always put a chair seat right under your hands as well. So just keep in mind. Something else I just thought about right now was I haven't done this with like a bolster on top of two blocks. Pretty interesting. It's kind of like the height of the chair. I'll venture with it sometime. So stretch the right hand back, reach the hand back. It's not a hand stretch, but it's on the sacrum. And then turn the waist to the right. If it's all a calf thing right now for you, it's so much in the left leg. I want you to bend the right knee a little bit. I know the calf will get a lot, but you're trying to work your waist to turn to the right and reach the right arm up. Okay, and I know some of you might go really into this deep, some might kind of just barely scratch the surface of this idea. But if the right foot is turning out, that's certainly incorrect. So there are some things that you want to keep loyal to. So the right foot is parallel towards the front of your mat. The left wrist could be getting a little bit of pressure. So now lower the right hand, so the block, and turn to your left. So both feet turn to the left, toes a little bit inwards. Feet step out so you have a wide stance with your legs. And then I'm just going to move my blanket in the middle so it seems balanced. But take the hands forward on the block so the blocks lower down to either the second setting or the lowest setting. So if you go all the way to the blocks flat and that feels like it's comfortable enough for you, or if they're second height, bend the knees and let the head lower downwards. Okay, but try to keep the arms lifted on something versus the hands on the floor. Even if you can get your hands down and push this way, I want you to have this traction in the armpits so there's drainage here for the lymph. So feel the back stretching. This is a good inversion, right? And it's maybe for some of us, this is a little more tolerable than, standing forward bend. This is a wide forward bend. Breathe into that massive back like you have big bat wings here. And if you want to be a bigger bat, right, you could bring the hands to the legs, hold on to the lower legs, elbows out, head down. Maybe some of you are going into the full inversion. And if you prefer, hands stay on the blocks. I know you're going to feel your face, your complexion. A little bit of a facial during class here for the circulation. Okay. Now, the weight is proportional down to your feet all the way through the lining of the bottom of the foot. Okay, so I want you to feel how that weight is moving back. So it's almost as if you lost your hands on this position, you would fall. I don't want you to fall, but I want you to feel how you test your balance in your hip bones. Okay, now when you bring your body weight back to the hands a little bit more, you're going to take the blocks to turn them and then walk to the right foot, of course. Let's turn back forward, back heel is up. Feel the lunge. Make it so it's a pretty high lunge, right? You're not pulsing down. Step the left foot to the right foot. Take the feet out to a good hips distance apart. Just feel the balance in the back of the knees. The strength back here is marvelous for our knees, right? When you feel this much bend, it's not a whole lot, but it's a nice strengthening for the knees. So kind of steady that bend of the back of the legs. And if it lurks into pain in the knees, then you don't do it. So some of you might have a little more straightness in the legs. I like to work around knee strength. And then lead with your breath to come to the forward bend. So when your head lowers down, I know that mentality might be, I just let the brain weight stretch my back. but I want you to work with the breath and that you're kind of leading yourself down and over. It's not like you're working with your smell or smelling, like that's not like just nose work, right? You're moving your ribs with your breath. Sniffing asana. That's a funny thought, huh? So the breath work. Now, if I hold on to my position with my hands on my blocks, that's different from my shoulders. This is good. I want you to try to keep that shoulder awareness. Bending elbows, bending knees, and head is heavy. Okay, now can you keep the neck long and step the right foot back? And the neck stays long. So instead of pushing my head up, although you might be looking at the screen back and forth, you'll probably get some kind of issue if you keep on that one, that one turn to the screen. So just kind of relax it a little bit. We're doing well. I'll look around, see how we're doing. So feel that left knee in that bend, strengthen around the knee. So if I put my weight in my hands and move my blocks up a little bit in my hands, let's say your wrist gets a little tension, you might focus a bit more on the underside of the left leg, the hamstring area, taking on some of this work, okay? Hamstrings can take a little more than a wrist, it seems. Depends on the position, but okay, now we steady with that lunge. The back knee is up, right? The leg is lifted. And then the back foot, you're going to step back. So you're going to bend through that left knee. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. The back foot's going to turn out so the heel reaches to the floor. So your lunge is just a little different, right? It's almost as if you could turn to your right and lift your arm up, but we're actually going to go the other direction. So I want you to feel where that back heel presses. Just a moment. Lift up the back heel. Feet are in two different tracks, right? So they're not in one line. The back one is open. Back foot is parallel. So as I feel that left leg start to lengthen, straighten out, okay? You're going to reach your left arm open. Just make sure your block is under that right hand and it's a little bit out to the side, so it's not right in line with your right foot. I don't want you to have the block so far out you've now gone into a dangerous balance, but you almost want to have this positioning of all the extremities, including the block, we'll call it an extremity, is they're spaced out so you can balance. Back heel might be lifting quite a bit, but work towards reaching. If your neck is getting a little bit overly toned, turn your head to look down to your left foot. Okay, feel how the motion of the ribs turns. Okay, that back heel is reaching. Good breathing. Ribs turn, left leg tries to lengthen, elongate the leg, and then exhale, bring the left hand down. Okay, now bend to the front leg so you have a pretty steady lunge motion, and lower the back knee to the blanket. And let's take a bolster to the mat across horizontal. And then we'll walk the left foot over to the right, toe, heel, swivel, knee goes open to pigeon. Okay, so we didn't do a cat-cow pattern I don't think we did a whole lot of that. So what I want you to work with here is to get settled so the knee is open and the hip is stretching, right, the left side. So your elbows could be on the blocks. If you want to get your other blanket, you can put it under your elbows if you prefer to have something softer. But feel if you can move your back from a little bit of rounding to a little bit of arching. Kind of flow through the back, posterior core, and the ribs flowing forwards. And there's some areas that you might have questioning gripping patterns. So this might be a time for you to really search out specifically how to hold yourself in the pose. If there's pain, then you need to process what to do with that. Like if it's a lot of stretch, it's overbearing, You can also put a ball or a blanket under the left buttock. The ball seems like it would be a lot, but if you sit to it and you kind of squish it in, it's pretty nice to have that support. Now it's just not as intense on my hip. It's kind of an interesting propelled motion. So the blanket would serve the same, but it might take you more to get that positioned in. It may look funnier with the ball, but we don't care about that. Okay. If you have a pet around, it might want to grab that, or a cat would not care. Okay. So feel the length of the back leg. Okay. And we're going to simply feel how the arch of the mid to upper back occurs here between sides. So you want to feel that your ribs flow a bit forwards. Okay, now you're very centered through the hips. So when you move the body to the second pigeon pose, you'll bring your hands, maybe your blocks will be essential, right, to this movement. So when you come up through center, you'll bring the right leg across, and then you'll switch the left leg back. It's a little easier to get into pigeon with one to the next side. And you might get a little bit off on your hip, like turn and shift, and then have to get back to center. So that could be nice to flow through the bones, right, when you put the pressure to them. But it's really up to you. If you add support under your right buttock, one side could be different. You might notice the back leg is different, or the right hip that you're addressing. Feel the natural arch to the spine. Yep, so let the body have its scooping pattern through the rib cage. Good. And then if you're lowering down onto the floor with your elbows on the ground, or a blanket under your elbows, or the blocks. I sometimes like to have something under my arm so that the body doesn't kind of cave in. So there's the props are there to support and bring your body into that therapeutic balance. Right? I love props because they can help the circulation quite a bit. Because if I didn't have the blocks, I would pretty much flop down, and my breathing suspension would not happen. I won't have this expansive motion, but it'd still be a good enough pose. But if the back leg can be heavy, in a few moments here. Now, feeling if you have an awareness of both sitting bones right now, or if that left one is sort of, it's not being sat on, so we might not have orientation of your sitting bones, balance in this position. So this pelvic tilt is probably naturally occurs in this shape. And what I want us to kind of give some balance towards is to strengthen as well in the hips versus just that idea of flexibility. Okay, so we're going to go right from this pretty positionally angled reach in our hip. And then what we'll do is we'll take our body so that when we are up a little bit, right, you're going to lean to that right hip, and then you're going to come back and have two blocks, push your blanket back, slide back off your bolster, and toss yourself back. Bring your bolster forward. We have so much fun with props. Okay, and then you'll want to get a belt. And I'll try getting a lot in here. Okay, try to get it all in. Buckle up your legs. So you got your legs connected. You got to buckle them up, unless you want to tie them, make a bow. But the buckle is nice, so that you can either tighten it, you can give a little bit of traction. Sometimes it works. Okay, slide your seat to the bolster, and then lower on your back, and get your bolster close enough so that your feet can push on it. And I think a flat blanket will be nice for this. I don't sense everyone will use that, but when you do have the choice to lift up your hips now in bridge pose, you're pushing out into the belt and the knees point a little bit outward. So the variation of trying to get a really, tone right into the center of the pelvis, this is how the pelvis works anyway, with our hips. It doesn't turn in, it actually turns the legs out. That's what that joint is going to do, the hip joint. So when you're lifting, I want you to get a feeling of arms overhead. And I think you probably breathe in when you do that. And then you exhale out when you lower the spine. So you decide, I'm going to be really relaxed with my belt grippiness. I'm going to let it be a little more open. But if I do have it loose, what your work is now going up and down is that you also, if you're going to have the belt be kind of wide, that you want to have that awareness in your back area, not get tighter, but actually feel like it kind of widens. Okay, so work with that feeling of motion. We can't make you feel anything, but push into your feet and then feel how it moves into your back. Now I can feel how getting rid of the blanket helps me a little bit. Your arms are pretty open. They're not completely splayed out, but they're not fixed like a robot. Okay, now I want you to get your blocks now. You're going to put them under your back. So you're going to flatten out the blocks so they're at the second height. The other day when we did this block under the back, we had the wall under our feet so we could push and we got really high up. I noticed some were able to get their block all the way up and then put the feet on the floor on the other side, which was really nice. So the wall could be amazing for getting our quads open. But right now it's a little different. So I want you to use the blocks. So I have mine set side to side. They're at the second height, second setting. And if you decide you want to have them lower, that's fine. And then see if you can let your legs stretch straight down. The blocks are just under the lumbar, not under the ribs. And the legs go straight down, the hips open. Okay, so we'll do kind of a different ending to the class today. I think what we'll do is like this relaxation, and we'll do a little bit of rotation and then come together at the end. So a little different. So the thighs have this directional motion a little bit out, like your legs have a kind of rolling out. If you can kind of get your belt and tighten it a little bit, try. You might be able to finagle that. I was able to surprisingly get the tail of my belt. I don't want to make it so tight that my back starts to feel tension, but I do want to keep it so my legs feel supported and secure. You can move around a little bit if you need to bring your knees into your chest and get the belt higher. You can do that too. Might as well, right? But you don't want the belt too tight. I can feel like brought it higher and made it tighter. That wasn't good. You can bring it higher, but not necessarily make it tighter. Okay. So the knee bones feel directionally assigned to be kind of pointed up. The hip bones might be rotating a little bit out. The ribs, though, you really want to get that to open. Almost always helps the back, right? So even though this seems contraindicated maybe in your brain that this is going to help the back, it's always the case. It's one of those scientific curiosities, but how the discs hydrate, right, is you want to create this arch, opening up the ribs, the lungs, where it helps the nervous system and any inflammatory condition. And then the arms relax down. So let the head be either on blanket or not. If it feels a little bit uncomfortable to have the height, you can release it. But steady that experience of in and out breath here. Right, we're going to do this kind of 3-part ending to the class. So right now we're in the eyes relaxed phase, movement of the mid-body with the breath. And you might feel some surplus of circulation right in the front of the thighs and also in the rib cage in the back. Now, bring your attention to the legs here, and I'm going to start to bring the knees to point up so the bottoms of the feet are on the bolster. What might be kind of curious, we didn't use the sand on the front of the thighs. Would have been kind of interesting, but get a feeling here where the feet push and then the hips lift. And as you slide the blocks out, you want to keep a little bit of that lift. It doesn't have to be exaggerated, overdone, but I want you to keep that feeling of that lift of the back. The hands reach down towards the bolster. And then your spine lowers so slow. Okay, almost where you feel like you're not sure if you're doing something or you're trying to hold a shape, but you're continuing to breathe and you're lowering down to really massage between the vertebrae. No one can do it like you, really, for your back. Even if there's a massage, it's a little different when you go one vertebrae at a time. And it's kind of one big chain too, isn't it? So now as that chain lowers down to the very lumbars, which is quite bulky vertebrae, right? They're very thick, chunky vertebrae. So once that's based, but you want them really strong, right? You don't want to have bone loss getting worse in the lumbars, right? That's one of the main tests, right, for the density is the lumbar. So when you feel that natural arch, you're going to bring the leg to cross over. So you're going to unbuckle and move your bolster to the right side and take that left leg over to the bolster. And you can put a ball at your sacrum area. It might be a little higher, it might be a little lower for you. You might just kind of roll to the right and then roll back onto the ball. And then add sand to the outer leg, maybe. Maybe you don't feel like that's a good idea for you. So it's individual sand, and you probably need a blanket under your head for this one so that the arch in the neck is satisfying. And then feel that openness of the left arm, and with that chest drawing out, you might roll your head to the left or keep it in the center. Okay, the ribs could feel pretty boxed up here. It's not a bad idea to have the final part of the class where your ribs are feeling really steady, stable with the breath, not too floppy, okay? And then as your eyes rest, give a few moments here, whether your head is turned to the left or not, where it feels steady in the hip. If there's something that needs to surrender, let that left leg really feel releasing, even though it feels a lot into the hip. There's no lack of sensations here. And it's pretty individual, even if you were in a class and being observed with the position, I think it's still more intuitive. What is a good direction for you with your knee? So right here, just, feel how that leg is crossed to the right. And if you move it a little, the bolster a little downwards, does that help your hip? You can feel this pretty deep into the back. And then when we come back to center, we're going to slide our sand away and move the ball. Bring your legs back to center, and when you start to switch sides, you decide if you're going to bring your knees to your chest between the two sides. I'm going to pass on it, but you might like it. And it's not necessarily bad for the sacrum, but there's some schools of thought with that, shocking the sacrum between the twist side. So you might keep it neutral, let the left leg stretch down, right leg swings over to the bolster. Final shape. And then we have the ball to that back space. It doesn't need to be right on the sacrum. It might be kind of a little challenging to note exactly where it is. Go where it's comfortable under you, at your side there. And then when you put that sand on, it could be upper, could be down towards the knee. And you might need to kind of fluff out your bag so that it's positionally steady. Reach with the arms. One side might feel a little bit more flowy than the other for all things, right? In the hip and the back. But give it equal support with your mind, breathing. And then your body breathing, right? Your mind controls that intake, out breath cycle. But then at some point, you just kind of let it go. Feel where your head is comfortable, whether turned or center. And give a few moments. Now feel how the abdomen expands and relaxes. Now, when you start to move into head center, feel where that leg is crossed over, and on your back, you can feel that extension of your spine via the movement of the leg. So that massive interconnectivity, right? So as you slide the ball and the sand, we're going to let this be a wave of movement to come up to sitting. So roll to the side and bring yourself up, and you might sit on your blanket or a bolster, whichever is kind of easeful to get under your seat. And then feel where the hips are balanced, and maybe after both those sides of movement, your back feels like, it's kind of an interesting layer all the way coming up to this position. So feel the hands grab the knees and let your back find its natural rounding, flexion, and then trying to set yourself back up to feeling the concentrated back balancing arch. Let your hands slide from your legs internally together in front of the heart. Steady down through the legs, hands towards the heart space, brain bowing in, surrendering at the heart. Let's feel the support of practice together.